The next stop in the race for the White House is South Carolina as next month's primary draws near. For Democrats, the Palmetto State marks their first official primary as Biden and his surrogates hit the campaign trail. For Republicans, Nikki Haley is looking to make her comeback in her home state, where the most recent polling shows Trump with a double-digit lead. Leslie Sanchez and Joel Payne join us now. Leslie is a CBS News political analyst who served in the George W. Bush administration. Joel is a CBS News political contributor, Democratic strategist, and chief communications officer for Move On. Leslie, let me begin with you. New Hampshire saw Trump beat Nikki Haley by double digits, but the numbers from a lot of analysts that I've spoken to suggest that there is some weakness there, that the former president, feels the threat of Nikki Haley, perhaps however remote that is, and that's why you saw an attempt by the former president and the RNC to suggest that Trump should be the presumptive nominee, even though only 2 states had voted. Now, they're backing off a little bit from that because a lot of people find that absolutely outrageous. And the threats that Trump has made to donors who would donate to Nikki Haley's campaign seemingly has also backfired because she's raised $2.5 million. What do you make of that? I mean, just that dynamic of trying to force a candidate who, let's just see how the cards play out. If she can keep raising money and she has a path forward with that money, why not wait until other states vote?
You know, it's interesting, Vlad, and I think you characterized it so well. That is very much the same type of argument that happened in 2015 going into 2016 with respect to when people looked at a Donald Trump unorthodox type of presentation, nomination. There were so many people within the establishment base of the Republican Party who just couldn't see a character like Donald Trump being the Republican nominee. And they held on, became never Trumpers, became moderates, conservative independents, and there's still that 25%, whether it's true independents or this part of the Republican Party that does not have an appetite for Donald Trump. And they will continue to kind of fuel the flames of a Nikki Haley type moderate candidate. But that's the reality. Her support is coming outside of the core of the Republican Party, and that's not a way forward. All the endorsements for politicos in the state of South Carolina, though she's raised money, it's not going to be enough money to mount a national campaign, especially leading to Super Tuesday.
Well, speaking of a national campaign, Joel, it certainly seems like the Biden campaign has kind of kicked it into higher gear this week. I said earlier, it almost felt like they were kind of workshopping messaging, kind of low-key for the past several weeks. And then this week it was, a major event talking about abortion rights in this country, a major announcement about infrastructure investment, and then a key endorsement from the United Auto Workers Union. And, people should know that it's when you get an endorsement from the union, it's not just about the, a thumbs up. There's a whole sort of machine that can push enthusiasm for you. How important was getting the endorsement from the UAW?
Oh, it's really important. And all the things that you mentioned. One thing you didn't mention, by the way, is Jen O'Malley Dillon, who is White House staffer. I believe she's Deputy Chief of Staff was her title, is going over to the campaign as campaign manager. I know Jen. I worked for her 15 years ago. She is possibly the most well-respected organizer in the Democratic Party, and adding to a really strong campaign team as well. I think what it's signaling is that the general election has started, which is, you mentioned that the machinery of the UAW endorsement, you mentioned all the other things. The signaling is so important because it tells your coalition, hey, it's time to focus in on the task at hand. It's time to unify. It's time to put the arguments and the disagreements to the side and focus on the unified task at hand. So that's what this week says to me, and I think you're going to see more of that. That's signaling to the coalition to come together and to rally around Joe Biden and Democrats up and down the ballot.
Leslie, New Hampshire. Sorry, go ahead, Les.
No, I was going to say that's a really interesting point. Because the criticisms from the Democratic high-level former, let's say, Obama administration operatives was that the Biden administration hadn't really put their core base to work outside into the campaign. So I think the point is important with Joel saying it's signaling that it's a general election campaign now. Despite the friction that may be happening on the Republican side, I think for all intent purposes, people see Trump as the Republican nominee.
Let me ask you about immigration, Leslie. New Hampshire GOP voters, primary voters, listed immigration as one of their top concerns. But this week, as you know, it's been reported that the former president is advocating against a bipartisan deal. So in essence, the former president, is coercing those who are afraid of him in the Congress to kill a deal that the Democrats have been working on with help from the Republican side in a bipartisan fashion to try to stop the flow of migrants into this country, to stop the flow of fentanyl that continues to flood into the country. The former president, wants to kill that deal because he feels that it would help the current president, Joe Biden, politically. I mean, what does that tell you about the current state of the GOP?
I think it's hard to say what Trump is going to do other than he's trying to look for an advantage for himself. I don't know that that's necessarily going to work, certainly not on the Senate side. In the House side, there are going to be a lot more people receptive to hearing Trump's message on this. But let's be very clear, this is not something you put a Band-Aid on or a couple of few, Hail Mary attempts to deal with an ongoing crisis that started day one under the Biden administration. It is not for a lack of law, but for a change of policy that you see this massive influx that has, kind of shown that we now have an open border. So even if an effort was successful, it would just be a start to unravel this crisis that you see today.
But do you think then that this, in the same way that Trump threatening folks to not donate to Nikki Haley, you see she raises $2.5 million, could this also benefit President Biden? Because he could say, look, the other side's not being serious. They're so afraid of Trump that they're willing to allow, whether it's policy related or legal action that's required, they're still willing to allow this to continue unfettered because they think that this is beneficial to them politically.
I think politically both sides have drawn the lines, Vlad. I think you're right. That's probably what you're going to hear. But Republican senators already have started to push back on that as a false narrative. It's ridiculous because of the policies that were changed, not the law, right, that led us to where we are today, not waiting in Mexico, opening up the asylum effort, not having enough judges in place. There's perverse incentives for people to rush the border right now. And that's all at the feet of the Biden administration. So, again, to say that they're going to do some big change when the president has always had the authority to do so, I think lands flat, certainly among Republicans and I think increasingly among Democrats.
Joel, let me ask you about Joe Manchin. He was in South Carolina yesterday where he said that he's going to wait till after Super Tuesday to decide on whether or not he'll launch a third-party bid. So I can understand a third-party candidate would probably want to wait kind of to the last minute because it's very expensive and you don't want to be spending money now. But we haven't really heard much from him in a while.
There's a lot of analysts who are saying that if these third-party candidates are more of a threat to former President Trump than they are to President Biden.
Okay, so let's ask Joel that, and maybe also Leslie.
Get Leslie to weigh
who
in,
is a third-party candidate? Who should feel the most threatened? Maybe like a Joe Manchin.
Depends on who you ask. Leslie said perverse incentives. That's a nice tee up for this one as well. So look, Anne-Marie, you and I have talked about this before. You know, I love to point out Joe Manchin's favorite thing is for people like us to sit here and talk about him on TV, both with tongue in cheek and also some reality. He enjoys the attention, and I think now that he has declared he's not going to run for re-election, this is the best way for him to get some attention for, I guess, the things that he cares about. I think it's very unlikely that Joe Manchin is going to consider a third-party run. I think that would be with somebody like No Labels, but I guess I would say I don't get the sense that that Joe Manchin and No Labels have aligned interests, because Joe Manchin has talked about wanting to make sure that we defeat Donald Trump. He has not necessarily talked in a pro-Biden. You know, he has not been a cheerleader for the Biden agenda, but he has been very clear that he thinks that you know, it's a bad idea to empower Donald Trump. And I think in terms of like who the third parties help and hurt, depends on the candidate. Some people would say that an RFK Jr. might steal votes from Donald Trump's coalition. Some people might say Cornel West would steal votes from Joe Biden's coalition. And I think that there's an argument about what No Labels takes from. There are folks, frankly, like us, I work for Move On, who believe that No Labels is a threat to keeping the Biden coalition together. But there are others who say that it's a threat to Donald Trump. Either way, this election is going to be a binary choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I think both political parties have incentive to kind of focus their coalitions on that choice.
Leslie, I see you nodding a bit.
I think he's so right on. You know, Joe Manchin, you could argue, wouldn't even win his own state. You know, he's kind of lost touch and been out of touch with the Democratic Party. But Trump's appeal for a lot of what you would consider that rural base or ex-urban base, working class, middle class, is extremely strong right now, even with the kind of floating voters that don't really identify with either party. So who would it hurt? I think I agree with Joel that it would hurt more the Biden administration or Biden in a binary matchup. And you're already seeing Trump do well in states Republicans didn't expect: Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, just based on real clear politics, how it's been done since November. It's hard to imagine Republicans leading in those areas today. So the appeal is very strong. I think it pulls away from the Democrats. But again, it's too early to tell.
All right, Joel, Leslie, always great talking to you guys. Thank you.